to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fawcett. Each week we interview experts in AI, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. In our show today, we look at brand consistency and generative AI and design. I'm joined by Cathy Clarke, co-founder and COO of DXM, and Lee Swearingen, co-founder and CDO of DXM. And you may recognize Lee. He's done an episode before when we got to chat a bit more about creative design and generative AI's impact on that. So I'm excited about this conversation today. Welcome, both of you. It's a really interesting topic, and I get a lot of questions about brand consistency. I think as more and more companies are getting more involved in content creation and design and creative, those issues are just going to come up more. So anyway, why don't we jump in? You guys just do a quick introduction and give us a little bit of background and tell us a little bit about DXM, and then we'll just jump into some questions.
Okay. Thanks for having us, Michael. I'll start with a little bit of our history, and then Lee can add on to it. We have quite a long history together, so it might take a little while. If you start to doze off, just stop me. But
it all goes back to NYU. Earth Day, our first date.
Nice.
Yeah, we met at NYU in their ITP grad program. That was in the Tisch School of the Arts. And that program is a mix of artists and technologists. And at that time, we were working on applications for interactive media, which was new, and very exciting. So after grad school, we both moved west and we both worked at Apple Computer for a while. Then Lee left Apple and joined Macromedia, where he was the creative director there, also working on, multimedia tools for creative people. Macromedia went public and then was acquired by Adobe.
Yeah.
When we decided to start our own firm. So we started a design firm, and then over the years we mostly worked for, because we were in Silicon Valley, we mostly worked for tech clients. A lot of them were like the innovation groups at larger companies. We did a lot of work for companies like Yahoo, HP Labs, Ford's Automation, automated driving, their vehicle research. We worked on the development of Siri prior to it being acquired by Apple. So that was our first AI work. During those years, too, we always looked for ways to kind of spin out products and release our own work. So during those years of having the design firm, we wrote 2 books related to like software application development for multimedia. We released a sound library with a friend of ours, Paul Ormson, who's a sound designer. And more recently, we spun off a startup for an app called Video Kits that we built and deployed that was for collecting structured video recordings and interviews. So last year, we, saw the train coming down the tracks, around AI, and we decided to jump in and, create a startup because we saw how AI was completely changing the design process.
Yeah.
So we have a great team with us now. A little shout out to our CEO, Rick Kramlich, and John Kramer, who's our product officer, who has a background at Adobe. Our designer Meg, we have 2 engineers, Topher and Ryan, and I think we're off to a great start, basically. So I think Lee probably could talk about how he was so excited about the changes that AI are making early on.
Yeah, so I can talk about that. I'm glad Cathy mentioned some of our history there, because if you remember back then, this was pre-internet. I hate to age ourselves that way, but it's valid and it's useful, and there's no shame in that. But the technology we were so excited about was because we had this new technology, and now you could interact with it, right? So these were new types of media. In fact, we called it new media. And I think Cathy and I both were top 100 new media producers back in the 90s. And it's relevant again today because it's exactly what's happening. We have new technology that's enabling us to create new media in new ways that we can't even imagine yet. I think there's going to be new forms of marketing materials and content that people can create that are just going to be, just completely going to change the game, right? So about a year ago, we started experimenting with all of the models, the Midjourney, Dolly, Stable Diffusion, mostly on the image gen side, but also other media types as well. And every week it just got better and better. And eventually, when we saw the quality surpass what we thought it could ever do, we just realized that the way that we design and produce content is going to change going forward. So, we've started crafting sort of unique visual styles for our clients, and to help them build out their brands, kind of taking an AI first approach. We just thought, what if we just started with AI and did everything using AI tools? What would it be like? And I think it's important to think about that. You really have to play with this stuff. So we started doing that, and just use case after use case. Clients really loved it. So then we started investing our own money into developing custom tools. So we thought, let's just, if this is so powerful for us as designers, and it's enabling us to do so much more than we ever could for our clients, and they're loving it, why don't we make a tool that can scale and let other people do the same? So I think that, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I feel like today, no company should ever buy stock image libraries or buy stock assets for anything. They should create their own, and they can create their own. So I look at it as like, what we're doing now is we have style building tools that basically allow us to play with the entire history of visual design. So it's like looking back and saying, hey, right at my fingertips, I have this new palette of visual components like perspective, composition, color schemes, lighting, cameras, shot angles. All of those things that make up a visual can now become a part of your brand and to create a very unique look for your company. So I just find that incredibly exciting. It's, I went to art school and I learned some of that, but now it's just all at your fingertips, and you're mixing and matching and creating these amazing quality styles for companies. So
yeah, I think it's a really exciting time, and I certainly came at it more from the written side than the content side than the image side. But I've done a decent amount of that over the last year and a half as well. And it's just simple things like, rather than searching through free images, I just create my own little image for the blog post. It takes 2 minutes, and that's only because I had to go generate a JPEG out of the web version it produced. But it is definitely interesting, and it has just in my experience with using it in the business to help really grow and build that brand is made a huge difference. So I see, and obviously, Lee, you and I've talked about this before, the how much of an impact this can really have for brands. So I'm curious, and what I really wanted to dig into today, because this is something that, like I said in the open, it really has come up in conversations a lot over the last few weeks. But one of the problems, and this has always been an issue, is maintaining brand consistency across your teams and across a business. And now with all the tools and coming at this from the AI side and all the things that an individual can do and a team can do, consistency is even more important. And I know you guys have a unique sort of perspective on how to do this and how, and why it's important. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? Talk about consistency and how you see that and how you see that working for brands.
Yeah, we decided to start, with the brand and with that consistency in building out these tools. So that really was the starting place for us. And I think, brands are recognized and trusted through that consistency over time. That's a goal, right? And, but, brands are also dynamic and they're evolving all the time. So you have to consider that part of it too. I like to think of a brand as a persona, right? Like as a person moving through the world, experiencing different things, going different places, changing their clothing, having different emotions. Like it's not really a fixed thing in terms of the brand.
Sure.
So in addition to establishing like the initial brand guidelines and the rules for the brand in terms of consistency, we also, in building the software, have to account for that dynamic nature of the brand as well. How do we, enable people to evolve their brand?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the styles come in that Lee was talking about. Like, we've done a lot of work in setting up the initial brand through the brand agent, and then enabling people to build styles that can take the brand in different directions and create different styles.
Yeah.
And I think,
I think if you've ever dabbled with AI tools, it's easy to create a nice image, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit harder to create a nice image that's also fits with your current brand.
Right.
And then it's really hard to create that consistently going forward, right? So that's what we excel at. I mean, we spent a lot of time just not only it's about how you're building them in the first place. So you're using prompt engineering to try to lock in those certain attributes and then allow other variables to change. So in other words, the brand designer, whoever's in charge of the brand, has to initially do some experimentation. That's our style building tools where you're gonna create that. Is it right? Make adjustments, fine tune it, and then you want to lock that in. But once that's locked in, you can actually enable other people in your organization to start generating their own assets without messing up the brand. So you lock in the color palette, you lock in some of those other visual components I talked about that are part of your unique look. And then they can change the subject matter, perhaps, but they can't change the color palette, or they can adjust the colors, but they can only adjust the colors from the company's color palette, right? So things like that really democratizes the marketing asset generation, because now anyone in the company can contribute to marketing efforts. A salesperson can create their own. They know exactly what they want how they want to sell to their customers, and now they can create custom personalized assets that are really good quality and on brand that speak to their customers, and they do it themselves. You don't have to go back to creative services for that.
Yeah,
so I feel like
that's
we're setting up that initial style and then locking it in.
Yeah, I think we've all talked about style guides for years in companies I've worked for, but it's a document somewhere, and most of the time you couldn't even find it if you needed it. So, it's interesting to hear how, because of the fact that we're moving more and more into this technology, we could actually use that as a way to drive that consistency through establishing guardrails, essentially, right? That keep you within certain parameters. Well,
that's right. And also, as Cathy mentioned too, it's dynamic. So that brand guide becomes sort of that single source of truth, but it's also adjustable. So you can create variations, campaign variations of that by tweaking certain things, but you're not going off brand. I don't think. I think you're going to see less rebrands, big major rebrands, and more evolutionary brands going forward using this technology.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I guess in fact, and every time I've gone through rebrands, it is a big jump, right? You've got something that you've used consistently hopefully for some period of time, and then the next version of it is a big change, a big jump versus evolution through that over a period of time. So talk a little bit about history, though, because I want to, I've been around for some of this, but I think it's interesting to hear from the design side how has brand consistency historically been done in creative content for marketers?
Yeah, I think we are familiar, with the process today, right? A business establishes its brand, its logo, its color palette, its brand voice, rules for usage, things like do's and don'ts, and then they document those things, either, in a PDF or in a website, and then they distribute those guidelines to internal people, to contractors, freelancers, partners, to make sure that they get those guidelines into use. And those people go out and they create creative materials, right? Like they'll buy stock photography that, hopefully adheres to the guidelines, or, they'll go out and do a photo or a video shoot, again, hopefully within the guidelines, and they make content for the brand. And then the big thing about this whole process is that it requires the brand to establish like this centralized approval system, right? To say, okay, this can go out in the world, or this doesn't adhere to the guidelines. So, we've all heard of like the brand police, and no one likes to do that job. But I think over time, then, like the process has been that guidelines are periodically reviewed and then they get updated. Maybe it's because of a visual update or new products that come along, or, they just want to change the company direction. And then that whole process just repeats, right? So we see that like making the whole compliance side of it, a real challenge. And that's where we decided, like in looking at Gen AI, it's like, how can we apply Gen AI to that whole process, like, and make it better? And that is where we started, really.
Yeah. I mean, it takes the brand police out of the hands of the people and puts it into a systematic way to manage. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and now the tools we've built, we're going from, the first thing we'll do is create an AI brand agent for the company. So we take some information. It could be as simple as a founder story, even surprisingly. But typically you'd want some reference images, maybe the existing brand guide, and we can ingest that into a brand to create a brand agent that can then help you to write your copywriting, or it can help you to generate visuals in your brand style. So it becomes kind of this co-pilot for designers. We think of co-pilot for engineers that's helping them code. We literally think of this as a design agent who's helping you with all of your creative efforts, because it can once it knows who you are and knows your stylistic attributes and your brand guide, rules and do's and don'ts, like Cathy mentioned, it will cooperate. And so you can say things like write a prompt that highlights a feature of one of our products. And you don't even necessarily have to specify which product. And it'll just pick one, give you a visual, write the scene, where's the sun, the very descriptive image that's highlighting a feature of a product. So that kind of thing is just, it's faster than humans at ideating. So it just really helps us to come up with new ideas, explore different options, and then we become the curators who get to pick the best ones to run with.
Right.
And I think that, I was going to say, the person that owns the brand, like right now we're saying that's us, in our system, but they still have that curation role, to make sure that, stuff is being generated on brand, and people that are within the organization that are generating stuff are still, doing it on brand, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it certainly does give you a better framework to work from, I guess. And then the other thing that, Lee, that you said there, I think is really interesting, and I've seen this more and more through enterprise type tools like this, is the movement of the prompt engineering back a level. So the user's not having to think of every complexity and iteration of what that needs to say. The tool actually helps the user generate the correct. That's really
exactly right. Yeah, we sit on top of the models, so it's an application layer on top of the models, and we just look to use the best one for the job. So, and the best one for your particular style. You may have a style that's better off using Leonardo or using Dolly, or and even per touch point, you can mix and match. So the users of our tools don't need to worry so much about the models that are underneath it. They get to experiment with those, and they can pick those and choose which ones they would like. But once you lock in that style, it's going to continue to use that particular model. And then what you can do, which is amazing there too, is right away you can just generate you can generate a whole year's worth of stock image assets, right, that are already on brand. So if the agent's also helping you anticipate what you have to do over the next year or two, you have trade shows coming, you have this and that you need to prepare for, you've got video thumbs that you probably need to produce for your social content. You can have that stuff generated in advance of needing it. So it really, some of those benefits aren't even really that tangible yet, because we hadn't really been able to do that before. And so it's a way to kind of get out ahead of all of your marketing efforts. And then with the velocity of social, you really want to be able to be able to react to anything, like Cathy was saying, dynamically, just to be able to react to a situation very quickly. Any posts that you're putting out, if it has a subject matter, you can create an image that goes along with it. So,
Yeah.
Right.
We're letting more people, contribute to the marketing effort, without going off brand. So.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting shift in the way that marketers approach this. Then, so tell me a little bit more about from the marketer's perspective. What's the creative content process look like in this new paradigm?
I think that it is about opening up that process to more people within the business, and keeping them on brand, and then just opening up more creative opportunities in general, like to bring more people into the creative process.
Mm.
And I think we do that by allowing people to generate within our platform. We have this feature called Simple Gen that we call it Simple Gen right now. But I think, Lee, you could probably explain how that lets anybody in the business contribute to this library of assets that we're talking about.
Yeah. The style builder tools let us experiment with all these variables and come up with something great. And then we kind of lock those down and only expose what variables they're allowed to play with. Right. And that's what we call simple gen, or we just, it just takes out, it just enables anyone to do good quality content and stay on brand. So, if it's, maybe they get to change, we know what the company's subject matter might be. For example, like there's a client we're working with in Tahoe that's related to mountain sports. And so we know a lot about the company. We know that their audience might be, mountain bikers. They may be trekkers. They may be pickleball players. They may be snowboarders, skiers. And so there's a whole list. And so say you have a good illustration style. Now what you're doing is just enabling them to come in and alter the subject matter. So, you could have that be an open field and they can just plug in any subject matter. Then you do start to have that risk of going off brand because they type in some crazy thing perhaps. But, I think, that's basically it in a nutshell, is like, we're just putting those guardrails up to enable, personalization to a certain degree. And
but it's pretty great that
not too far.
Yeah, I mean, it's really great that we have this UI where someone can go in and say, okay, under the location drop down, we have things that are specific to the brand, and they can say, okay, change the location from Lake Tahoe to Tokyo, and then that changes the background of the image. Like really is like this fun experience to have when you're playing around with it. And I think it is exciting for like the CMO or the creative director or the designer to be able to set up these styles and then, deploy them to more people in the business. So it's not just the designers that are responsible for generating the content anymore.
Yeah, so it really does democratize, and you guys used that word before, but really democratizes that across the whole team then, because even salespeople can generate certain things and that they may need or whatever, right? So that's interesting. And
a lot of
the
times
other
they
thing,
know. And a lot of times they even know better. They know better what they need to, what they want and what they need, right? Because they just know their audience. They're more intimate with their audience.
Well, the other thing, Lee, that you said, and you told me this, I know, in the last time we talked too, is that the one thing I noticed through this whole thing is nowhere in this have you said, oh, and the machine just goes off and does this, right? I mean, we're still talking about processes that involve all of those people on the team, because everybody then can be involved in this process. So it actually, instead of eliminating people, it actually opens it up for more people to be involved.
Yeah, I think so. It's still a very creative tool for the creative team, because they're going to be establishing, creating new styles and setting that up. And then they get the joy of kind of deploying that to the rest of the company to create their own. And so I think it's not even just it's democratizing for sure, but it's also crowdsourcing. So it depends on the size of your organization. I mean that's a lot of content that could be potentially produced by employees in various departments. Maybe you have companies, satellite offices in different countries even. So, the amount of, it's just impossible. These are things you couldn't do before. For one, you just couldn't afford to do that much sort of localization and seasonal assets, regional assets. You wouldn't be able to afford to do all that. So I don't think the budgets are going to decrease. I think you're going to have the same budget. I'm just going to do a lot more of it. And then you'll also find what works better and you'll do more of that. So I just think it's going to be a overall sort of efficiency and efficient use of your marketing dollars, pretty much. So.
Yeah. So you started and I hear a lot of the benefits there, but let's just for everybody's sake, let's do a little comparison there and let's talk about what are the benefits, what's the pro in here, and then what are the cons? Because obviously we're still learning how to use the technology. The technology is evolving very quickly, daily. So what are the pros and cons of this, using generative AI in the content creation supply chain?
Yeah, I think definitely faster ideation. So if you can think of it, you can see it. You could be in a room with the C-suite trying to come up with a new website design. They can have input and be able to react to visuals in near real time, right? So that's a huge game changer in itself. But that's on the ideation side of it. Ability to iterate and test those things quickly. So you're designing something new. Here's 50 variations. Narrow it down to 5. Take those 5 and test them. So if it's a social campaign or something, test that with a few users. Make sure you've got it right before you deploy it. So I think that whole ideation, iteration through production is going to be condensed down to a fraction of the time. I think you can just get ahead that way too by creating more content in advance and being ready for it when you need it. So
to get that faster buy-in, and there's so much demand for content that you can get ahead of that without compromising the quality.
So what about the con? I mean, what are the downsides to this at this point?
Like you said, it's changing every day and it's hard to keep up with everything. And, it is hard to get consistent results, especially across models. And it is time consuming, to do that. And, we find that like creating a single asset with Gen AI is fun. Like you said, for each podcast, creating one image is fun.
Yep.
And when you try to do something, on brand and over time, it's not as much fun, really. So I think, right now it requires learning prompting and, knowing enough about prompting to get good results. So, we see that changing, but right now that it's still difficult.
Yeah. I mean, taking some of that away from the general population of users and putting some of that into the machine or to the tool. I've seen this, evolve across a lot of different companies I've talked to. And it seems like that's the direction that this piece also starts to go, is that we can move the prompt engineering a bit away and make this simpler for the user to actually get the output they're trying to get by using the tools.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing I wonder about when I think about this, though, is there have to be some risk in using this technology. So, I mean, what are the brand risks associated with with new AI-enabled processes?
Well, the things that we're hearing, that brands are concerned about, and we have been talking to a couple of larger agencies, about this stuff, and there's definitely, a risk associated with models making content based on copyrighted material, that
Right.
they're trained on. And then that creating liabilities, for companies that are using that content. So that's unresolved, but, we're a layer above that, because we are operating at this UI level above that. So, we definitely look forward to like seeing regulation, in that area, whether it's like provenance tracking or watermarking, a lot of the things that they're talking about. We'll definitely go with whatever comes along in terms of those things. As that layer on top of the models, we have the ability like to quickly switch too from one model to another. Like if we find that we don't like the output that we're getting from one model, then we can just say, okay, we're going to move to another one. Like that, that's our there.
Yeah. I mean that's obviously, even just in like me using it for content generation, that sort of thing, I've noticed big differences in the models, and also in the models when you're using them, right? Because last week I might prefer this, but then this week I'm trying something and it's like, oh, that didn't work at all. I'm going to switch to another tool. So having that capability in the back end of a whole process and a system, that certainly would make that much simpler for the team that's having to deal with that.
Yes.
And I think that I'm going to twist the risk thing around, because I do, obviously the legal thing is we're just going to have to all watch it and see what happens. But I think in the end, it's going to be just too useful for so many different things,
Mhm.
and that I think there's a risk of not using it. And the risk of not using it, well, one is there's just sort of competitive risk, right? So it's like, wow, these smaller upstart brands are coming out strong with very strong identities that their customers identify with,
Mhm.
and now they're competing with us, right? So
Yeah.
so you've got to keep up with the competition, obviously, but so there's a risk of not doing it. But I also say when there's a risk of not doing it, I think it's because no one's out to copy an artist. I mean, it would just be dumb for a brand to try
Yeah.
to mimic an artist's style. Like, you just don't do that, right? So if anything, our niche is safer that way, because we're going out of our way to create unique custom styles for your brand,
Mhm.
right? And that's what they want. So I feel like eventually, though, this stuff is going to enable, like I said, new forms of media. Like, how do I just tell my authentic story in some new way that's just
Mhm.
not another post that I'm scrolling through? Maybe
Mhm.
there's a new form of storytelling. It's more like a slideshow, but it's got it's got AI music and AI narration,
Mhm.
and I'm telling my founder's story, or I'm telling whatever it is in a totally unique and powerful way. I think those things are going to happen because
Yeah.
it's just built for that. And
Mhm.
so when that starts to happen, I think I think it'll gain a whole lot more respect for what it truly can do.
Mhm.
And if you're not playing with it now, you're going to have a lot of catching up to do, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with that, and honestly, I give that advice almost weekly, sometimes daily, because I think that's the real danger, is not jumping in right now. It's the not jumping in right now and really falling behind. It's the real
Yeah.
danger. Well,
Mhm.
so we've talked a lot, like in bits and pieces, about your platform and how you've approached this. But can you, just to kind of put this in a good focus for the audience, can you walk me through how your platform addresses, the opportunities of using AI to solve this problem of own brand consistency with that content, whether it's images or text?
Yeah, I think related to the consistency problem, like we're doing three things. Like we're starting with the brand agent for one, and there we're using context, for the brand. So we take any vectorized files that can provide like that foundational knowledge about the brand for the AI, and it doesn't have to just be brand guidelines, as Lee mentioned. It could be something as simple as the founder's story, or
Mm.
mission vision statement, and really we take whatever we can get to get started with the brand agent. Then we add the custom prompting that we talked about, when we are using like a RAG model, retrieval
Right.
augmented generation, um, to customize the prompts based on the brand profile and these defined styles that we have. So, that provides a layer that, where creative people don't have to know prompting, but they can still create the on-brand materials.
Mm.
And then the third that we mentioned also is that, we have this modular multi-model architecture where we can, support new models that come along as things get better and better. And then we can even go back and like regenerate content for the brand based on these new models, which is really exciting. So I think it's those combination of things. And like Lee mentioned, we'll use the best model for the job, depending on what the final output is or what the touch point is. So I think those three things together probably, address the on-brand piece of it.
So it seems like that underneath this, the brand agent is really the I won't say secret sauce because we just told everybody, so I guess it's not secret. But but the idea anyway that's really the way that you're ensuring consistency across those different use cases. So why is that better for marketers? I mean, how does this make the marketer's life better?
Well, I know you can talk about this one, Lee, because it, lets you do what you didn't do before.
Yeah, I think, so like anyone who's also done some copywriting, the more it knows about you, the better it can write for you.
Sure.
And if it knows your tone of voice, it can do that as well. And so that's just a good example, but it's doing the same thing that you're seeing for copywriting, but for visuals, visual assets. And so I just feel like, like some of the coolest things are like, so we have talk about not saying too much. I don't want to say too much about what we have, but we do have this really interesting approach that will, I'm just going to say it, but it'll actually recommend styles based on who you are. So it's mapping visual components to brand attributes, if that makes sense. So maybe, because it knows that the system knows that your company does mountain sports, it knows to recommend a GoPro camera as a photography style, right? So that's pretty cool stuff. I mean, so that right away, the agent's already working on your behalf. Like as soon as it knows something about you, it's helping to craft these styles that are appropriate for you and your audience. So that's to me, that's really powerful stuff. And it's so exciting to play with that. And when it works, it's incredible. We have a lot of work to do to make that work for any brand and for any situation. And now how can it be a freemium model so that anyone can do it, we're well on our way to doing that very soon, where I think you're just going to be able to say, here's my brand guide. And then within a very short amount of time, here's 4 different mood boards that you might like. And pick the direction you'd like to go in, right? From that, all you're then doing is saying, okay, what's your subject matter, right? What is the type of content you're going to need? Who is your audience? What does your audience look like? What scenes are they typically in, right? What environments are they in? What locations are they in? Then you can start applying those styles to all that different content and immediately have a library. So I think I said way too much. We probably have to edit that out. I don't know.
We won't tell anybody.
But that's what we're doing. And I just think it's great. I think it's, when it works,
it is exciting. Yeah. It is exciting.
Yeah. It's a creativity boost. And like, I think, there are a lot of happy accidents. Like, some of it is really intentional, but then we are surprised by the number of happy accidents that we get.
Yeah. Just because you're generating so much more stuff, so you can react to a lot more things, mistakes sometimes become incredibly relevant.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes happy accidents are great. That's
only the human can sort of notice that and say, oh, that's what make that association with the brand, and then put it together.
Well, the other thing to me that jumps out is, and you talked about this in a couple of different ways, but we know that individuals that engage with a brand, they want things to be personalized to them. And that involves a lot. And it involves a lot more sometimes than we've even thought about, because it could simply be adjusting the image to my location, which in the old world is hard. But in this world, you could actually do that and serve up an image that is more consistent with my world experience and make me feel more engaged with the brand. So, I mean, to me, that's
Yeah.
extremely powerful from a customer experience perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Well, so we talked a lot about this, but I'd love to get a few kind of specifics. So, do you have any company examples, customer examples that you could share that, talk about how they're using your platform now for content and design?
We do have. We decided to take on 10 customers in March as a goal, and
Mm,
we met that goal, which was great.
nice.
So we have about 12 customers now, and we have a mix of startups, SMBs, agencies, and enterprise.
Mm,
So the startups that we're working with are getting, these asset libraries that Lee was talking about, and that's a huge cost savings for them.
yeah.
One of the SMBs that we're working with is using us for increasing their social content, like the
Mm,
velocity and the quality and the
yep.
quantity, that whole thing. And then one of the enterprise customers that we're working with, NEA, is using us for biweekly editorial content. So we've gotten into their process for regularly releasing
Mm,
content, right? And then we're talking to three and working with two ad agencies and exploring use cases and how we can integrate into their workflows, because we're really trying to
mm,
figure that out. So I think we should be able to take on like another 10 customers in the next month or so as we build the
nice.
software to release it, this summer. So
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that's great, and it does help, I think, just to think about the different kinds of businesses that are engaged with it, because it certainly does meet the expectations and needs of a lot of different types of industries and businesses. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
we think
so
ultimately we'll make our way into the enterprise,
yeah,
but we're going to come from the agency down and from the bottom
yeah.
up. Because, like you said, earlier when we were talking, the sales cycle on the enterprise and
It's
there's a lot
hard.
of hoops you got to jump
It
through,
is hard.
and we can't move that slowly. We
Yeah.
have to move faster than that.
Yep. No, it's great, and it's. I mean, typically, right? I've been involved in a lot of startups, and definitely that idea of I'm going to start in this contained way and then move up as I build out more and more features and get things tested and more robust for all sorts of different applications of the technology. So makes sense. Well, so I could definitely keep going because I think this is really interesting, but we are at the end of time that we allotted for today, so I don't want to keep you guys too long. But before I let you go, I'd love to get a recommendation for the audience, and I always ask this at the end. But could you recommend somebody like an author, a thought leader, or somebody that you think would be that was influential to you that you think would be really useful for the audience?
yeah, I'm going to take this one. I'll put a little twist on it because I'm going to use it as an opportunity just to pay a tribute to a friend of ours, Michael Chanover, who very recently passed away after a battle with cancer. We just heard about it in the last week, and he was way too young. But I had hired Michael when he was just out of school from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design,
Mm-hmm.
and we worked together over the years. He worked at Frog Design and then went on to work at Leapfrog, where he hired us during those years. Most recently, he worked at Khan Academy. And like throughout his whole career, he was always a big proponent of play, like the idea of play in design, and having a playful mindset, and really having one of exploration. And for me, it's a good reminder to step back from some of the complexity and to add some like fun and lightness and joy
Mm-hmm.
to what you're doing in design. And I think it really applies well to working in AI also, because sometimes it can seem very dark and heavy and complex. So a lot of over the years, a lot of the research that's been done on play relates to gaming, but IDEO has a play lab, and it's run by a woman named Michelle Lee. And they've done some great work in recent years, around this idea that complex problem solving, can benefit from play and collaboration and that mindset. It even helps with like de-risking, before you go into designing and releasing something. So I think that Michael was before his time, in that respect. So I thought I would want to I didn't mean to get so emotional during the podcast.
No, I mean that's really and I that's a philosophy that I really do also really believe in. I think you're absolutely right. To be able to open up your creativity isn't always just about sitting here and staring at my screen. There are certainly other ways that I need to engage and bring on that creativity. So yeah, that's a great recommendation, and I really really appreciate that. And Lee and Cathy, both of you, I really appreciate you joining me today. Interesting conversation, and I look forward to seeing what you do with the platform in the future. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining. Remember to hit that subscribe button. And for more on AI and other software research reports and posts, check out the arionresearch.com/blog and /research reports. And don't forget to join us next week. I'm Michael Fawcett, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.